how are you watching this video? Anyways, you might remember this dinosaur game from Google Chrome that you can play when you have no internet. But the problem is that this is not a horror game. So in this video I'm going to fix that. The first, pressing the A or D key. Now the movement is literally 90% done already. So I moved on by making a prototype environment. But that takes us to the next problem. You see, the original game is an endless runner, which means that, well, it just keeps going, obviously. And in my game, the world just stops existing. So I wrote some code to spawn a prefab in front of the last spawn prefab, and as a result it creates an endless ground for the player to walk on. Now earlier I said that the movement was 90% done, because the player also needs to be able to crouch. After modifying the code, I realized that there's actually no point in crouching yet. So I made 3 different variations of rocks you need to crouch under. But I am already getting tired of these placeholders. So I exported the entire Unity scene to Blender and started making the ground tile and a desert environment. I then gave it a sand texture in Substance Painter, but if you happen to know what a desert looks like, you know that there are these cactuses. So I made this cactus model, and by this I mean 6 different versions, to make it look more dynamic. Moving on to the next obstacle, I decided that 8 different rock models weren't enough. So I thought it was a good idea to use a different method, by using a displace modifier in combination with a Voronoi texture. Yeah, maybe not. But this actually turned out to be a great idea, because I can generate different rocks by just moving around the faces of the model. But I didn't stop there, because I made even more rocks for the environment, which turned out to have 20,000 triangles. Yeah, I really need to fix that.
Every day, a new photo of me sleeping appears on my phone. On the 7th day, I scrolled to the last one. In the photo, my eyes were open and I was smiling at the camera.
Need to fix that. Also, don't ask me what kind of rock structure this is. I'm sure it will look good when I give it some textures. Alright, enough about rocks. The last thing I made is this tree and small bush model, and that means that the environment is done. After importing it to Unity, it was time to place all of the models around the desert, which made me go insane. But it was definitely worth it in the end. Now, the only thing left to do was to generate the environment just like the ground. However, this creates an issue, because now you can walk endlessly in a desert, but it's very boring. So to fix that, I wrote some code to randomly spawn the obstacles. You see, I gave the ground tile prefab 3 areas. For each area, it randomly decides to either spawn a cactus or a rock. If it spawns a cactus, it randomly chooses between 3 different variations. And if it spawns a rock, it randomly picks one of the 3 different variations. And now it starts to feel more like the original game, especially with the score in the corner. But before moving on, I want to change the graphics a bit. Since the Dino game is kind of an old school game, I want it to look like an old PlayStation retro game. To achieve this, I downgraded all of the textures to get this pixelated look. Then I added a skybox and also downgraded the texture. And to top it off, I played around with the lighting and fog. But that's not everything, because I also added this post-size effect, these scan lines, and finally a pixelation effect. And now the game feels much more atmospheric. But the most important part of this game is the T-Rex, and somehow my game still doesn't have anything close to that. So I fired a Blender, and that's when I remembered that I don't have much experience modeling animals, because this is a cat I made like 4 years ago. Yeah, don't talk about that. Except for this mutant whale model I made a few months ago, that I am kinda proud of. So, with my newly gained confidence, I started making the T-Rex model by using a reference image. But somehow it ended up looking like some sort of undiscovered deep sea creature. After fixing that, this looks a lot more like a base of a dinosaur, but without legs. So I started making details like his legs and feet, my bad, his tiny little arms and his mouth with some teeth. But this T-Rex looks a little bit too normal. So I imported a part of the ribcage from my whale model and started to cut the T-Rex in half. I'm sorry, buddy. And now we have this mutated T-Rex model, but to make it even more disturbing, I started making textures for it in Substance Painter. To finish off the model, I made an entire rig for the T-Rex and, of course, nothing went wrong. I imported the model in Unity, but instead of the player being the T-Rex, like in the original game, I thought it would be scarier if the player gets chased by the T-Rex. I said that the player gets chased by the T-Rex. And I gotta say, the way he moves looks pretty realistic. But to make it even more realistic, I started making a walking animation. It is nice that the T-Rex can actually move now, but I noticed that the T-Rex is very dark when playing the game. So to fix that, I added some lights and created a separate layer, so that the lights only affect the T-Rex and not the environment. Now, it is cool that we have a T-Rex in the game, but it literally doesn't have any purpose yet. So I made it so that the T-Rex can appear at either the left or right side of the player. I then made this target model and wrote some code so that the target moves across the T-Rex. And if you don't click the target in time, you will lose the game. But it doesn't really make sense to just click on the T-Rex. So I made this flare gun model and gave it an old looking texture. Back in Unity, I gave it this sick animation and made it so that you can shoot with the flare gun. Ah, damn it. But when you shoot, nothing really happens. So I gave the T-Rex an animation and made it so that it goes back to the original position. To top it off, I also made this explosion particle when you hit the T-Rex. Now, you might have noticed that during the T-Rex minigame, you can just walk through the obstacles, which is, not really how physics work. So I simply fixed that by just destroying the objects in front of the player. Now that the T-Rex obstacle is done, there are two more obstacles I want to add, with the first one being a sandstorm. I made this sandstorm using the particle system that will randomly appear and reduces the visibility. With the sandstorm done, there is only one obstacle left that is impossible to miss, that being the pterodactyl, or whatever the bird is called.
Pterodactyl.
I hopped into Blender and started making his body, legs and arms, or whatever these things are. Yeah, you just have to trust me on this one. Anyways, I proceeded to make his head, but it ended up looking like some sort of Pokemon. But eventually, I managed to get a much better result. So that means it is time to finish the model by making the wings. After finishing the model, I spent a good amount of time texturing the model to make it look prehistoric. Now, the only thing left to do is the most fun part of making a model, which is rigging. And let me tell you, everything seemed fine at first. I mean, for the most part.
What the hell?
Until I tested the wings, which for some reason just wouldn't cooperate. I literally spent 2 hours modifying the rig, weight pinning it, and making like 15 different rigs. Until I finally had something that worked. So then I never touched the model again and quickly exported it. I then made a flying animation in Unity and modified the code so that besides cactuses and rocks, it can also spawn a pterodactyl when the player reaches a certain score. But I've never seen a bird fly in the same place before. So when the player gets close enough, the pterodactyl will fly towards you. I also made two versions, one where you need to jump and one where you need to crouch, just like in the original game. But I went one step further and made it so that it can randomly change its direction at the last second. It is nice that the majority of the game is done, however, there is still one massive problem. You see, when the player touches an obstacle, literally nothing happens. So I made this pixelated game over effect and started making a cutscene for the T-Rex, which ends up in the game over screen. Moving on to the pterodactyl, I also made a simple cutscene where the pterodactyl takes you really high and, well, just drops you.
Kahit tulog pa ang mundo, kumakayo na ako para sa pangarap ng
Then I went a step further and also made an intro animation. To top it off, I made it so that it gets dark when playing the T-Rex minigame, and I also made these lightning effects because, well, I don't know why actually, but it looks cool. Then I also made a jump scare for when you lose the minigame. Now that all of the animations are done, I added some small jump scares for the T-Rex and Pterodactyl that randomly appear while playing. Now the game is practically done, however over time a lot of objects are getting spawned, which can cause performance issues later on. So to fix that I wrote some code to simply destroy a tile or object once the player has passed it. But there is still one more thing we need to add to make the gameplay complete, because in the original game it gets harder over time. So I made it so that when the player progresses, the speed of the player increases, the score counts faster and the minigame gets harder. Now the gameplay is actually done, so the only thing left to make is the main menu. But to make the main menu really complete, I wanted to add some music. So I fired up Ableton and I have no clue what I'm doing. But I ended up on this chord progression and this drum loop. Then I added like 5000 effects to give it a retro vibe. Okay, so the game is finally done, and with a banger main menu track. Anyways, if you want to try this game out for yourself, you can download it for a small price of €0 and let me know in the comments what your high score is. Thank you so much for watching till the end and until the next one.
Roblox just wouldn't make 8 hands. So I decided on my very own 8